Hello, everybody. Dr. Lonnie Stewart here from the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast. Are you a physical therapy student about to start studying for the National Physical Therapy Examination? Or maybe you're a professor, a program director, or clinical instructor who teaches DPT students preparing for the NPTE? Either way, we would recommend checking out our sponsor, NPTE Final Frontier, and the community they've built around preparing for and succeeding on the NPTE. That exam and the preparation that goes along with it can be long, tedious, difficult, and stress-inducing, but it doesn't have to be. NPTE Final Frontier has the tactics and resources to help address all of the usual barriers. They even have scholarships to help with NPTE study courses, FSBPT registration fees, and even research opportunities. And if that's not enough, they're even donating to the very first annual HET Podcast Scholarship to be awarded at the end of every year. Go to npteff.com for all of the details and use code HET for 10% off all purchases. Links to both the NPTE Final Frontier and their scholarship options are available in the show notes. And now, let's get ready to learn.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. F. Scott Feil, and I've got with me today a very special guest, Dr. Nancy Smith. Nancy has kind of taken me under her wing and showed me all things grant writing and service-based learning. And I'm excited because it's not very often I get to geek out about stuff like this. There's very few people that actually understand service-based learning and are as excited about it as we are. So, Nancy, thanks so much for taking the time to come on. Tell us a little bit about your academic journey and how it's led you to where you're at today.
Well, thanks for having me on the podcast today. My academic journey I started out actually as a clinician, and I had a student recommend me for an academic teaching appointment. And I was in as a clinical instructor, and the DCE came to me and said, "Well, we happen to have a academic appointment as an adjunct professor. Would you be interested?" And so I started out as an adjunct professor, and I started out actually teaching cardiovascular and pulmonary, which was the topic that nobody in the department wanted to teach. And had experience in that area because I was working in a largely geriatric setting with people who were post surgical and working in the acute care setting. After a couple years of doing that, I transitioned into full-time academic roles and then was started becoming the supervisor of our pro bono clinic. I've been our supervisor of our pro bono clinic since about 2012, and I've been in academia since 2010 full time. And during that time, held a lot of different roles and done a lot of different things in the space around service-based learning and around community engaged scholarship. So I've really enjoyed my time doing that because I felt like it's a needed area of scholarship that we really need because we really need to engage ourselves with the communities around us, and we really need to understand what's going on in the communities around us in order to do that. My journey in academia is pretty typical of a lot of people that are starting out in academia, starting out as an adjunct professor, and then having to go about gaining additional experience and also gaining additional certification. So during my time as a faculty member, I've become certified as a geriatric specialist, and I've also completed a PhD during my time as a faculty member. So I did not start out writing grants, I will say that, and I did not start out as intending on doing community-based and community-engaged scholarship, but my journey kind of just led me here. And I would say, like I said, I did start out in directing our community-based pro bono clinic, but we've evolved since then. And we have grants through United Way and also through AHRQ, looking at community-based falls prevention, looking at how we work with our community and preventing falls, and looking at how we also promote healthy aging in place and healthy aging in our communities.
Yeah, I love that. I see so many parallels in my career and where you're at. Just kind of getting started in academia, haven't really published anything yet, haven't written any grants yet. Wasn't really too interested in the community-based learning stuff. Service-based learning was my dissertation, but didn't think I was going to apply that as directly as I am now having to apply it. And geriatrics, same thing. I'm working on a board certification for that, and becoming, certified in a couple other areas within the geriatric realm to kind of help with falls prevention. So it's becoming a new research agenda direction for me a little bit there. But let's start out by just giving the baseline here. What is your definition of service-based learning, so the audience has a point of reference?
So my definition, I will go from two sides here. I'm going to go from the community side and I'm going to go from the student side. So let's start a little bit from the community side. From a community side, we use asset-based models. So for those not familiar with asset-based models, we engage our community. They tell us what they need, not the other way around. And that's really important for communities of color who we serve, because it allows them to engage us with them. It lets them tell us where the needs are and also allows them to direct us in what they feel like is most important for them. So, for example, I have been working with community leaders in different areas of our local community. We're situated in East Winston-Salem, North Carolina, which is a community that is medically underserved. And I've been working with the community organizers and community leaders in the local communities, and they call me on a regular basis and say, hey, this resident or this person needs services over here, and can you provide services to this person? We also work with community agencies. So for services that we cannot provide, they help us extend the service reach that we have. So, for example, we work with an organization called Shepherd Center, and they help us provide services by installing grab bars into people's homes or helping to upfit people's decks or upfit with ramps. We can't do that. We don't have the capacity to do that, but they do. And so, because they have that capacity, we allow them to exercise that capacity. And I would say also too for us for service learning, it's thinking about what resources already exist and building good partnerships. So we have been in partnership with our pro bono clinic. We're in partnership with a large free clinic in North Carolina, the Community Care Center of Forsyth County. They are one of the largest pro bono clinics in the country, and we are in partnership with them, and we have been since 2008. And we are their providers of physical and occupational therapy services. They had a clinic, they had space, they do our scheduling for us. And so it's a mutually beneficial partnership. It benefits their patients, it allows them to provide services that they would not otherwise be able to provide, and it allows our students an opportunity to learn and serve. Thinking about it from a student-facing side, our WSSU motto is enter to learn, depart to serve. And that is instilled within our classes from the time students enter our program. Second semester, they start serving in our pro bono clinics. We felt like it was really important for us as a faculty to start getting students into the clinics early and often. We also felt like the reflective piece that goes into service learning was really important, that students were able to reflect on the impacts that they were having, and that also students were able to exercise their social responsibility responsibly. That being said, any initiative that we start, we try to ensure that it's sustainable and that we make sure that when we're working with these communities that anything we initiate, we are able to sustain for a long period of time so that services are not just provided for a day, services are not just provided for a month, that they're provided on an ongoing basis. And that allows our communities to depend on us and to rely on us and to know that services will be there no matter what happens. And I think that's important for students to see because that's part of our core values of social responsibility as a profession. And I think, as we are trying to instill social responsibility as a profession, it allows students to see, hey, I'm part of that social responsibility. The other thing we have students reflect on when they reflect on is how health equity is not equitable for everyone. And so, how we see health and equity in society and what their part is to ameliorate health equities and equities within society and make health more equitable for everyone. And so, I mentioned we have our pro bono clinic that runs out of the community care center of Forsyth, but we are also partnering with United Way, running a pop up clinic on Monday afternoons. It's on the bus line and it serves patients with MS, and it also serves patients who have neurologic conditions. And it runs every Monday afternoon. And we see patients for free at that clinic as well. And then students are also running Otago classes and working with our Moving for Better Balance and classes that we run through our senior centers. So we also serve rural areas in our community. So we have rural areas that are close to Winston-Salem, but just don't have good access. And if they were to have to get access to a preventative balls and balance class, it would be over an hour drive for them. So we do provide classes both virtually and in person for falls prevention. So I think from a service learning perspective, students see the continuum of care from prevention and wellness through thinking about ameliorating conditions, and also too from thinking about once people have thinking about the prevention and wellness continuum, thinking about even secondary and tertiary prevention. And then, thinking about the reflective component that happens with service learning, they're assigned to do reflective assignments, both from a written standpoint. They also have a project that they do in their neurological conditions class that involves them interviewing a patient and talking about the impacts that these clinics have on their abilities to function within society. And that's the movie project. And they actually create a short film that's about their service in the community and the impacts that they might have had with particular clients in the community.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, for me, community service was just something I kind of always did. My parents had brought us up doing, volunteerism and stuff like that. So it was important for me to try to show my kids that, this is important. This is why we do it. And so it was important for me to incorporate that into my work life too. And I wasn't really sure how to go about doing that. So when I started my dissertation, I said, well, to me, service-based learning is a perfect fit for physical therapy because I personally learn better in the clinic on my clinical rotations and through experiential learning. That's the best learning experiences that I had. Now, granted, everybody's not the same, but it made sense. It was a perfect fit because I could teach you about the Berg balance scale in class on a PowerPoint and show you how to do it, or we could do a balance and fall screening out in the community using the Berg balance scale. I could teach you the Berg balance scale there. And then we could also help and benefit the community by doing that screening to help maybe identify a couple people that could be potential fallers, right? And so it seemed like such a great fit. And yet when I looked at it and I did the research, only 50% of PT schools at the time of my dissertation were using some form of service-based learning. And it was a little unclear if maybe they just weren't calling it that, or it wasn't really true service-based learning. But it was interesting to me that 100% of programs weren't using it. So I thought maybe there was some sort of intrinsic characteristics maybe that maybe prevented us from doing it. Basically, my dissertation showed that was not the case. Everybody's for pro bono work and service-based learning. And then all right, well then the next question is, then why aren't we doing it, right? So I think that's some more stuff that we have to dig into as far as the barriers and stuff go, right? But as far as the Physical Therapy Practice Act, right, like that's one of our goals, our obligations is to do pro bono work when we can. We're supposed to provide for people that don't have access, whether it be for financial reasons or lack of ability or services or a disaster. We're supposed to be there in those times. So I think it's a great model for students to see and then carry on with, after the fact. How did you get started in coming up with this program and like piecing it all together? Especially, let's start maybe from the grant side of things. Like how did you come to the point where you were like, hey, I think we're going to need a grant for this. This is how I'm going to put it together.
From the grant side of things, we kept saying, hey, we need this equipment. Hey, we need this for our clinic. Hey, wouldn't it be nice if? I'm not really good with hey, what ifs. I'm like, let's fix this problem. So people receiving pro bono care should have the same quality of care as people who are receiving care who are paying for it or who insurance is paying for it. We should be receiving the same quality of care. And that was my first initiation of, hey, we need to find some grants. So we started actually in our pro bono clinic looking for some foundation grants. And we first partnered with Islamic Relief to fund some grants for us. And they very graciously funded some grants, which helped us provide some additional staffing resources and also helped us provide some equipment resources for our clinic. And one thing that I would encourage individuals to do is really look on the foundation funding side, because there are foundations that will fund both direct client service grants, meaning that they will fund equipment that goes directly to clients, and that will fund clinic operations side grants. Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, for example, will fund grants like that. United Way in our local community funds grants like this. And so we started looking for grants that would fund our operations because we needed TheraBand, we needed electrodes, we needed just things that massage cream. And we also needed to be able to provide equipment to our clients. So we needed to be able to provide crutches and walkers and canes and just various things that clients need because they have mobility impairments, and we need to be able to provide them something to help them with their mobility impairments. That was kind of where we started. And then, just based upon my experience in geriatrics, looking at people who were institutionalized and people who were not, and thinking about my experiences in working in under-resourced facilities and patients who didn't have a lot of financial resources. A lot of times, patients who ended up in facilities, they ended up there because their homes weren't accessible to them, or they ended up there because they just didn't have the financial resources to make modifications to their homes, or they didn't have caregiver support. So I started thinking about what we could do in our local community to address those issues. And so there was a team of us that came together around this, and we sat down with our rehabilitation counseling department, in our OT department, in our PT department. So this was interprofessional. And we always think about these grants as interprofessional opportunities. And the reason is that we all bring opportunities for students to collaborate together and to also think about how each one of our professions may contribute to the care of the patient. We really wanted to pull in our OT colleagues because they might have some good insights in how to make homes more accessible. They might have some good insights on the different occupations that people might participate in during the day. And so it's not just a PT enterprise, it's an interprofessional enterprise. And we also wanted to make sure that our students could collaborate. So in all of these grants, we're thinking about collaboration. Actually, our IRUSA, or Islamic Relief Grant, helped get occupational therapy started in our pro bono clinic. So there's actually only 2 pro bono clinics in the entire US for occupational therapy. We have one. Just kind of thinking about how we did that from this genesis of this kind of sitting down thinking about what do people need. We said people need the ability to age in place successfully, to not fall, to prevent injury, and to be safe as they age. We also thought about what structural barriers there were to people being able to do that. So some of the things we identified were people don't always have financial resources to do that, to age successfully in place. So we partnered with Habitat for Humanity, and Habitat does some of the home repairs that people need to be able to stay successfully in their homes. And they also do some home modification, for example, widening doors. It's really hard when your home was built in the 1940s and your door is 24 inches wide to get a wheelchair through that door. So we thought about those factors as well. We actually wrote in our grant to have an equipment closet. So we have an equipment closet where we provide equipment that goes freely out into the community. So we provide equipment that Medicare typically does not fund. We provide grab bars. We provide 3-in-1 commodes. Sometimes even if Medicare does provide a 3-in-1 commode, it's maybe not sufficient. We provide tub equipment, bathroom equipment that Medicare doesn't provide. We provide rollator walkers, and we provide sometimes even wheelchairs for individuals because they just can't afford them. Even if with the copays, you give somebody a copay, they can't afford the copay. Where we provide that free of charge. And then our local agencies, we partner with agencies to get those things installed for individuals. So from equipment to installation, it costs nothing for the homeowner. We also partner with people who are renting, partner with landlords to get those things installed for people who are renting as well. So you have to think about all the things around those individuals. Some people don't own their homes. And so that's something that we work with landlords on a pretty continual basis. The other thing we thought about was locating clinics within either walkable distance or on transportation. And so all of our clinics, when we do clinics or when we do falls and balance classes, we offer virtual options. We also offer classes located in the community. We're just concluding a class in the community right now, an Otago class that's been located in one of the housing communities in the East Winston area. We had actually people coming to that class over a 12-week period. That was organized with one of our community leaders. And one of our community leaders actually went out and canvassed the neighborhood for us. And she's been coming and pulling people into that class every week. Kind of when we thought about this project and kind of going back to the grants aspect, we thought about what we would need to fund this. So things that we asked for funding were additional staff. We asked for direct client support. So direct client support meaning equipment, direct client support meaning funding for renovations, funding for community partners, people that we were going to partner with. One of the nice and cool benefits that we found is that we've had people since the initiation of the grant that have been able to age in their home until they passed away. And that's successful aging in place. Whereas people, and I'll just give you a client story because that's always neat. We had one client who called us because every time it would rain onto her bed. She was a double amputee, and she was operating at wheelchair level. And she called us because her house was not accessible to her. She was having difficulty doing dishes, cooking in her home, and accessing the features of her home just because of the situation that she had in her home. When we got into her home, we also figured out the whole back wall of her home was rotten, was going to have a major problem in the back of her home. So the roof was replaced. The raccoons were escorted out of her attic. The back wall of her home was replaced. Her sinks were put at a height where she could reach her sink to do dishes. She could cook. Her bathrooms were modified where she could transfer. And she was able to live in her home until she passed away. I would say that that's a pretty successful story that we had. And we just actually, another successful story that we had is we had a patient who I kind of did some anticipatory needs for her and put some grab bars into her home. She called me about 3 weeks ago and she said, "You won't believe it. I told you I didn't need those grab bars, but I would still be stuck in my tub had you not put those grab bars in." So, just kind of also anticipating needs before they actually happen is some of the things we also do for our residents in the community. And we also involve students in doing some of these home assessments when they have time, just so they get practice. Because that was one thing I never got to do as a student. I never got to go out in the home and look at a home and say, okay, what does this patient need? That was something I had to do as a geriatric specialist and a geriatric therapist, is look at somebody's home and go, okay, what do they need? And anticipate those needs before they actually occurred. And so, I think kind of coming at it from a preventative standpoint, not just an urgent needs standpoint, is something that I've been appreciative of having these grants and been able to do.
And now for a quick shout out to our newest sponsor, Varela Financial. If you're a physical therapist and you have student loan debt, you got to talk to these guys. What makes them unique is that they view financial planning like running hurdles on a track. And for PTs, the first hurdle many of us run into is student loan debt. Varela Financial will help you get over that hurdle. They not only take the time to explain to you which plans you individually qualify for and how those plans work, but they also take the time to show you what your individual case looks like, mapped out within each option. So if you're looking for help on your student loan debt or any area of personal finances, we recommend working with them. I use Varela Financial personally, and they were able to help me lower my student loan repayment from about $1,800 a month down to about $135 per month simply by finding the right repayment plan that best fit me, my family, and our life goals. You can check them out at varelafinancial.com. Link is in the show notes if you need it for reference, and tell them the HET podcast crew sent you. And now back to the show. Yeah, I definitely didn't get that opportunity in school. I didn't know how to do a home assessment till I was a home health therapist. And then at that point, it was like, oh, okay, new problems. We got to start solving them. So I totally get that. I love the incorporation of Otago in your program. Can you kind of walk us through the student side of things? Like you said, they start right at semester 2. What does it look like then for a student going through the program? What is this program set up to do to kind of show how the students can progress through it and learn?
So they start semester 2 in our pro bono clinic and community care center of Foresight. And they start just with the things that they know how to do, which is goniometry and talking to patients. So they are mentored by a second or a third year student. So we don't send them in by themselves. That's one of the ways we fulfill our CAPTE obligation, that students act as CIs so that they are mentored by a second or third year student. And then in third semester, they are required to do some reflective exercises as part of their community care clinic class, which is also their psychosocial class. They take a little bit more of active role as they start their musculoskeletal series and the musculoskeletal components. So they start upper quarter. So they start doing some basic evaluative procedures. And as they proceed through their musculoskeletal curriculum, second year, they become a little bit more independent and they start mentoring about third semester of their second year. Third semester of their second year, they start neuro, and then they start everybody in our program gets trained as an Otago coach. So everybody gets trained. So they become Otago certified in their neuro curriculum. And they also get assigned to coach someone in Otago, either in their geriatric class, which is their 8th semester, or they get assigned during their neuro curriculum. During that neuro semester, they're involved in 2 pro bono clinics. So they're involved in both the outpatient ortho clinic and also an outpatient neuro clinic. So a Monday and a Wednesday clinic. They rotate through those clinics. So not everybody is there every week, but they do get to rotate through. And they're involved through semester 8 before they go out on their final terminal rotation. So they spend 6 semesters engaged in the service-based learning through our pro bono clinics.
I love that because again, it's just adding more experiential learning. And the big thing, even like you talked about at the very second semester, early on, yeah, they might not be able to do too much, right? But vital signs, goniometry, and like you said, I think the big one is just talking to patients. The soft skills, being able to hold a conversation, being able to kind of read the patient a little bit and see what they're going through. How are they feeling? What are their emotions? Like what do they have to navigate? How can they get them to buy in and open up about what they're experiencing? I think that experience to me is so amazing because it really builds the foundation for when they do go out on their clinical. We can do simulations all day long, but really getting out there and in the community and getting to interact with patients to me seems like one of the biggest takeaways from this whole program for those students.
Right. And they have a good opportunity in our community care center of Foresight because 80% of our patients are Spanish speaking. So they have a really good opportunity to start learning how to work through an interpreter or how to work through with somebody who is speaking a totally different language than they speak. So they get some skills around working with an interpreter. So maybe the first time that they work with an interpreter is not on their clinical rotation. The first time they probably work with an interpreter is second semester of their matriculation in the PT program. So students have consistently come back to us and said, that's really valuable that the first time I had to work with an interpreter was not the first time I entered out on my clinical rotation. And I had some skills around that. And I knew I knew how to work with an interpreter. I knew how to work with a patient who may not speak the language that I speak. And I knew how to get the information that I need, even when the patient didn't speak the language that I was speaking. So I think that, some of those skills that we want to teach our students, right? We want to teach students how to be more culturally competent and how to be linguistically competent and how to consider what is happening with the patient is really important. Like, for example, I had a patient today telling me of the herbal remedy she was using to help her arthritis pain. And I was telling the students, hey, she's using herbal remedies to help her arthritis pain. And they were acknowledging it and saying, what effect do you think that that's having for you? And, they were acknowledging to her that, that was important for us to know. And, it was really, I think the valuing of the patient experience becomes richer because they know they had these experiences early and they had them often within our program.
Yeah, I mean, just so invaluable. I mean, things you don't even think about. Like you said, the interpreter, we talk about how, hey, you're going to, encounter interpreters throughout your career, and you're going to have people that don't speak your language. And, many hospital systems have good interpreter programs. Some don't. It's different for every setting. So you just have to kind of be aware, and you have to know how to navigate those situations. So it's amazing that they get that opportunity. What would you say to somebody who maybe was in that 50% that was not using service-based learning at their program, if they wanted to start doing something service-based and they wanted to, have a win-win for their students, their university, and for the community, how would you recommend they get started?
So I would say would start with small achievable goals. You may start with a one-off or a once per semester. You have to prioritize it because if you don't, just like anything else in the PT curriculum, if you don't put it in, it's not going to happen. We have student champions for some of our events that we do around service learning. And that has helped us too, because we have a share the health fair that we do with our medical school at Wake Forest. We have student champions that help us organize that event. So I think that some of the things don't always have to be faculty driven. And I think some of it can be student led. So we, in conjunction with what I do as a faculty leader of our pro bono clinic, we have student graduate assistants that help us lead our pro bono clinic. And they help us with some of our scheduling of students, and they help us with making sure that students get where they need to be on the schedule, and that we make sure we have faculty scheduled. So they actually tell me where to go and what to do. It's fine. I mean, that's part of their role. So I think, they're getting some also administrative experience and making sure that, hey, let's make sure that Dr. Smith knows that she needs to be in clinic on Wednesday. I think that is a strategy that's worked very well for us in making sure that we organize some of these events. I think the other thing is that we also built it into our schedule. So as we're doing our class schedule, we make sure we block time for these things. So we hold it's pretty much blocked out. Wednesday mornings are not allowed to be scheduled. So Wednesday mornings are clinic. We are not allowed to schedule anything over clinic. Same thing for Monday afternoons. We're not allowed to schedule anything on Monday afternoons. So I think for a program who's considering moving into service learning, you've got to think about what time you put in for it. But I think the thing is like when we went through our period when we had all these clinic cancellations for the COVID-19 pandemic, fortunately, we were able to count some of that clinic time because we had recorded it. We knew exactly how much time students had spent. We were able to substitute in 2 weeks of clinic time for their COVID, for missing for COVID. That allowed our students to meet their requirements for CAFT and graduate.
Wow.
And so I think, when thinking about kind of like, okay, what benefit is this going to have for our students? We constantly get on CPI. Our first entering students are operating at higher levels than typical first entering students. And that's because we've spent time with them in the clinic working on some of their skills and help them with some of the things that they need to practice, like their interview skills and some of their documentation skills. So we've practiced some of that before they even matriculate on their first clinical. And I think that that's important. So I think, as programs think about what the benefits are yes, it takes time, and yes, it takes effort, and yes, it takes some faculty member concentration. But I think the benefits of it to students and also to the community are immeasurable. And I think that, when programs are thinking about how to embark on something, it's got to be kind of that. It's got to be something that's intentional. And all of, like I said, all of these things are done with intentionality and for our students, because we've seen gaps. And before we had pro bono clinics and before we had more clinical, we saw gaps in their clinical skills, and we're not seeing those gaps now. And we're not seeing them having difficulty put together. And as one of my students said today to me, I was working with them in the clinic today, you know what, Dr. Smith, I'm getting a good orthopedics review because every time I've been here, I've seen a different orthopedic condition. And I've seen a patient three different patients. I've seen a patient with a hip problem, patient with a lumbar spine problem, and today I'm seeing a patient with a shoulder problem. And I've seen three different orthopedic problems, and I've gotten a good musculoskeletal review prior to my clinical. So I think, that tells me something too, because the students are saying, I'm seeing benefit from coming.
Well,
Um,
how amazing is it to step up on your first day of clinical and not having it be your first day putting hands on a patient? I mean, that's just, again, invaluable. You don't even think about that.
and I think it takes some of the anxiety down around stepping into the clinic. I had somebody today look at me and said, I don't remember how to measure the goniometric measurements. And I said, well, that sounds like a great opportunity to go practice that before you go out on your clinical. And she's like, I hope this is a no judgment zone. I said, this is a no judgment zone. I'm going to tell you how to do it, but I'm also going to tell you need to go practice. It also helps students do some self-reflection and reflect on the things that they might not know as well before they hit the clinic, so that we don't get those calls from clinical instructors like, I can't believe the student didn't know how to do their goniometric measurements. And, the student before this they had an acute care clinical, so they didn't do goniometry. They haven't done it in a little bit, so they had to go back and review it. So I said, before you go out in this next clinical, you really do need to go back and review your goniometric measurements if you're not that certain about how to do them anymore. And so it's helping them also spot gaps where they need to go back and fill things back in.
Yeah, just general self-awareness, and knowing that
Yeah.
it's okay to not know. And this is the time to practice and make mistakes so that when we do go out into the real world, whether it be clinical or eventual jobs, we can get it right more of the time and spot more of the patterns and make the right decisions.
It becomes a safe space for them.
Yeah, yeah.
And it becomes, they're mentored by faculty, and most of them are pretty comfortable with us. And, so that they feel like, okay, I may not know this, but I've got somebody here backing me up too. And so I think from that perspective, we talk about service. They are doing service, and they are treating a patient in front of them, and they are providing something to that patient to help that patient feel better and to get better. But they're also learning. They're learning how to provide physical therapy care to a patient. That was something that we always emphasize. You're here to learn, and you may not be perfect, and that's okay. And we're here also to help you figure things out. And if you can't figure it out, we're also here to help you figure things out.
Yeah.
So, it becomes a place where they can learn. And I tell them all the time that it's the best place to review for an exam prior to their musculoskeletal, whether it's in their musculoskeletal. I'm like, this is the best place to come before your musculoskeletal exam, because you're going to see patients with musculoskeletal problems. It's always funny when they always walk out, like, my test is on the shoulder tomorrow and I had a patient with a shoulder problem. I'm like, exactly.
The universe provides, it's funny
Yes,
because
exactly.
it really, to me, it brings home the 30,000-foot view, right? The holistic picture of the patient, not just test question on shoulder, test question on shoulder, test question on shoulder. It kind of gets them out of that tunnel vision a little bit and reminds them why they're here and what they're aiming toward and what their eventual goal is.
Right.
So it's just,
Right.
again, it's a win-win-win to me for, service-based learning. They're doing community service and pro bono work. They're learning, and the community's winning from it too, because they're getting services that may not otherwise be available.
Right. And just kind of a reflection from our community partners, because I sit on our board at a community care center, is, the reflection from them is that when they go up for competitive applications, it helps them. The services that they provide, the services that we provide, it helps them demonstrate that they're serving a broader segment of the community and that they're capturing, more conditions and that they're serving and how much service that they're providing. So it basically helps them extend their reach too. And it helps them when they are compiling reports and grant reports to say, hey, we not only have services that have been funded by this grant, but we've been able to provide in-kind services from Winston-Salem State. Here's the services, and here's the dollar amount of services, and here's the amount of CPT we've been able to
Yeah.
provide from Winston-Salem State. From that perspective, it helps, our community partners reflect back to us that it's beneficial to them from being able to be competitive from them to receive funding dollars, and it helps them to be able to basically help their patients more effectively. So, their patients aren't showing up to the ER because of musculoskeletal conditions. They aren't showing up to the ER because they have back pain. They're showing up to us because they have back pain. And we actually do sometimes even practice in a direct access model because sometimes they don't even send the patient to the physician. The patient calls with back pain and they just schedule them for PT. We're getting even direct access referral when patients are calling. And so we're getting our receptionists are even just saying, hey, just go to PT, like just head there, and not even scheduling them with a primary physician first.
Yeah, it's pretty nice when it all works out like that, you know?
Yeah.
Well, Nancy, thank you so much for your time and your expertise on this stuff. Like I said, I love geeking out about this. I could listen to this all day, but we have one final question that we ask all of our guests. And that question is, if you could change one aspect of higher education, whether it be DPT or otherwise, what aspect would you change and how would you change it?
I think I would change the process of sitting in seats. And why I say that is I think I would change how people receive their education so that education is more efficient and brings more of the clinic into the classroom. And I think I would change that we don't necessarily need more seat time to teach students. One of the things I'm pretty passionate about is how can we teach students in ways that doesn't necessarily require them to be in a classroom, but helps them to learn about the profession and helps them to grow as a practitioner from not only a hands-on psychomotor skill perspective, but helps them grow from into a socially responsive and responsible practitioner. And so that's what I would change. I would change what we do as a profession. And the other thing I would change would be how we teach people how to think about problems and how we think about the systems that surround problems. So we had a problem in our local community about people being prematurely institutionalized. So thinking about the systems that we're influencing that has been impactful for us, and thinking about how we change that system and how we reduce people being prematurely institutionalized. And so I think people need to think about how we change the systems of education so that it meets the needs of our learners and so that it promotes our profession in growing and makes our profession sustainable in the long run.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great take. Again, get out of the classroom more experiential learning. And I'm biased, obviously, having my dissertation on service-based learning, but at the same time, it makes sense, I think. I think it's a perfect fit for physical therapy. Well, where can people reach out to you and follow up with you if they have more questions or they just want to see what you're up to and learn more about what you're working on these days?
So I'm on LinkedIn, so they can reach out to me on my LinkedIn profile, or I'm on Twitter at Nance765 and Nancy765. Or you can also email me at smithna@wssu.edu.
Excellent. We'll put all those links in the show notes so that it's easy for people to find you. Nancy, again, thank you so much for your time. It was an absolute pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank you very much.
Well, I hope that episode was entertaining as much as it was informational and educational. If you enjoyed this episode or any of our past episodes, we ask you to please subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. And please share out the episodes to those who you feel may be able to benefit from them. We also urge you to follow us on all social media platforms at HET Podcast and let us know what topics or experts you would like to hear from in future episodes. And just as a reminder, none of the information on today's show should be considered medical advice. It's simply infotainment or edutainment to help educate our audience. For medical advice, we always advise you to reach out to your preferred medical professionals, and we'll see you on the next show.